Greetings and welcome to Creative Briefing. I'm Adam from Influxx Media Production, and Creative Briefing is an ad hoc show that looks at the many forms of creativity and trying to encourage and motivate and inspire fellow creatives to explore other areas of creativity, to encourage non-creatives or people who think they don't sort of fall into that category, or they don't have a creative bone in their body, that that's not true, and here's how we can lift the veil on creativity and how everyone can explore their own creativity in whatever sort of fashion that may be. So been thinking, as we go on our walks around the neighborhood in the evening, there's a lot of DIY, a lot of home improvement being done, and I was thinking, how can we explore creativity in DIY? I mean, obviously I can't bring like large chunks of lumber and power tools into the office where I do these live streams from, but maybe I can pre-record some of those elements, and maybe we can look at how you can explore creativity through an avenue of DIY or home improvement or some other sort of craft projects. But today I'm back in Photoshop. I'm going to do a nice quick creative briefing, and we're going to look at using the gradient tool. It's sort of very powerful. There's more to it than just simple A/B gradients. It can be used for any number of effects. And I was thinking, when I was using the gradient tool the other day, and I was thinking it reminded me of a back in the day, way before YouTube, there were these great publishers. And remember books? There used to be, you'd buy these tutorial books, like these sorts of things, and they had like great tutorials in, and Friends of Ed were a great publisher, had all kinds of Flash books and After Effects and Photoshop books back in the day. This is all pre-YouTube. So I remember one of those tutorials from the book that used the gradient to create a rather realistic looking rainbow. So I thought, I should revisit that today. And so sorry about that. So I downloaded this image from Unsplash. You can search for, I think I searched for like tropical rainforest or something. So go to unsplash.com. You can download this image if you want to follow along. So let's take a look at what we'll be making. So we're going to turn this image into this, a bit more vibrant. It's got a magical rainbow with either a unicorn or a pot of gold at the end of it. So let's get on with this. So first thing I want to do is isolate the background from the foreground, because I want the rainbow to go behind the foreground trees and come between the foreground trees and the background tree. So I need to obviously make a selection, and the best way to do that, as we've explored before on these shows, is look at the channels, see which one has the most contrast, and is commonly the case. Blue has a lot of contrast, so I'm going to duplicate that, and I'm going to do a levels pass on that. Bring up the brights, bring down the darks. So really my intentions here, what we're really trying to do, I'm not too concerned about anything that's going up here or anything that's going on down here. All I'm concerned with is where the foreground meets the background, and creating an area of contrast that will be easy to touch up by hand. Just giving myself a leg up to make sure that, so I don't want to lose too much and make it too crunchy. If we sort of zoom in to here, we can see some of the effects. If I zoom in, if I adjust it too harshly, you can see some of this is getting a little crunchy. There's not a lot of softness between the we're losing some of the anti-aliasing. So I want to get it to where it's good, but without destroying those edges too much. We have our channel. I'm going to go back out. Might make that a little more, just a little more. Okay, so now I can make a, oh dear, marquee tool, and I'm going to fill that with white. Just get rid of the bulk of what's here. I'm going to fill that with black. Now I'm going to zoom in and start and hit O to bring up the dodge and burn tool. I'm going to start with the highlights by blowing out the highlights as set up here, and the exposure is at 20%. I'm just going to, again, not concern myself with anything that's up here, just concern myself with the areas where the foreground trees meet the background. Some areas are already quite bright, some areas are going to need a little touching up. Now what we can do, I can hit the brush tool again and just touch up by hand any of these little areas that don't. So really I don't want to damage the edges again, so I go back to the dodge and burn tool, just going around the tree, going around the foreground trees, painting in the hollows, the holes where the background shows through, trying to make a nice clean high contrast selection. Should really be using the stylus for the Wacom tablet for this, because it gets to be a little hard on the wrist. So that clicking, clicking, clicking. Again, switch to the brush just to tidy up a few of those little. Okay, so that's the highlights done. So I can then take the brush, and actually I can just take the lasso tool and kind of go around roughly where I've burned out the area and just fill that, and then get the brush make sure I don't miss any little spots. So it's really a compromise between finding a big enough brush that I can cover a lot of ground with, that could still be blown out a bit more, to finding a brush that is small enough to get in some nooks and crannies and doesn't inadvertently paint over areas I don't want to paint over. Finer. Again, with a detailed photograph like this, one errant leaf being omitted from the selection isn't going to use the lasso again to just make a bulk selection around what I've already done. And now I can go back to the brush and just clean up some of these areas. So if I lose a leaf here or there, it's not going to completely kill. There's so much detail and noise in the image that you have a little margin of error. So now I've done that, got my nice clean high contrast white and the edge. What I want to do now is actually what we need to figure out here, and what I'm going to do with this is turn on the RGB, and what we get is this sort of rubylith overlay. And rubylith is an old-fashioned pre-computers masking, which is exactly why this masking overlay in Photoshop is red, because rubylith was a red, and you would lay it over, you'd cut it out with a scalpel, and those areas would you know, would be printed or exposed, you know, photochemically. So what I want to see here is all these little specks. Some of these are specular highlights where the light is hitting the leaves and it's sort of reflecting, and some of them are actually holes that are showing the background through, and I need to figure out which ones are which. So we can kind of take a look and get an idea. So I'm still on the let's call this matte, still on the matte channel, and I can, with the brush and the black paint, I can then make sure I go in and paint some of these areas, and I can toggle off to see what, you know, what is what. It looks like that is just specular highlights in there maybe. So specular highlights through here. The smaller pinpricky sort of shapes are like specular highlights, whereas the larger spots are more likely to be you know, holes in there. So I'm just going to go through and paint out some of these. Just grab a bigger brush and get a lot of this. Again, I don't think it's going to make too much of an issue. We might want to see some of these holes in the trees, like where the rainbow might shine through, so I do want to make sure I get the bulk of it. Let's see what else we have. Yeah, this is all specular right here. So I'm going to zoom in really close and just go through with a smaller brush and just try and spot out some of the remaining sort of pinpricks of light showing through. Just little ones like this, just so we can get like a nice clean selection. Now I think when this stream is ended, I will edit this video and just fast forward through all this stuff, because it is a bit laborious and obviously not terribly exciting, but you get the idea. There we go, nice clean. Let me just go through once more and fill that. So nice clean high contrast mask. I'm going to invert that because it's really the selection wants to be the foreground. That's the area I want to duplicate. So I can then go to here, I can load up, hold command and click on the matte thumbnail, and then click on the background layer, command control J, and I'm going to call that foreground. So now I have the foreground trees isolated. So what I'm looking at this, what I don't like is this area up here. Of course we've got the nice sort of tree line, but we have this area in the far distance that it's just all I want is just trees. So I'm going to crop this down so that half of that horizon line is gone, and then I'm going to use the marquee tool. I'm going to select this area, and I'm going to use the lasso tool to subtract this area, and I'm going to do shift delete to fill with content aware. Oh, actually, let me undo that and do this on the background layer. Try that again. There, so now we have more of a sort of dense looking jungle. We have no horizon, so it you know, gives the impression that the trees are infinitely going on for forever. So I'm just going to sample to fill in a couple of remaining spots there. So we have our edited scene, and we have our foreground on a separate layer. So now is where the fun starts. So I want to come down to here and create a gradient layer. Now the gradient layer, if we select this, you see Russell's rainbow. This is what comes with. Actually, let me backtrack a little. If we if I reset gradients, so now these are the defaults. If you're just dealing with the default gradients, if you go down to on this little gear wheel up here and you go down to special effects and you append those, you get this Russell's rainbow. Now this has been in Photoshop for, I don't know, at least a decade. It's been in there for a generation, so it's really cool. But what I'm going to do is edit this a little bit. One, I'm going to start with, I'm going to edit the color. I'm just going to click somewhere next to the blue, and I'm going to add a new sort of color wedge on the gradient map, and I'm going to make that a violet color, because we all know the Rainbow song, right? And violet is definitely in there. So as we can see, if we look up here, we have the ability to edit the rainbow or edit the gradient as we are looking at it. So I'm just going to accept those for now, and I'm going to change the gradient fill to a radial, and then I'm going to scale it up. Now if I hold down Command and I put my cursor over that value, I can actually put my cursor over the scale label to that value, and I can click and drag, and now it's gone off the screen. So if I take my cursor away from the actual palette, if I move that over here for the minute, I can now go into the image and I can drag and position where I want that rainbow to be. Now obviously a rainbow is a massive, you know, environmental effect, so we want it to be quite large. So I'm going to keep scaling it up until it looks like it's not just a badly drawn in effect, and it's looking a little more like an apparition. I like the way it's going right behind that tree right there. Let me just make it a tiny bit bigger so the arc is less pronounced. So I think right about there is looking good. So before we accept that, I'm going to leave this sort of box over here, and I'm going to click on the gradient again, and I'm going to edit this gradient. So first of all, I want to click on the blue wedge, and I can see its location is at 82. So what I want to do is make sure these wedges are 2 degrees apart. Now I believe this goes up to 100. Yeah, so it's from 0 to 100. It's like in percentages of the map, let's call it that. So I want, if the blue is at 82, I want the violet one to be at 80. And I'm going to, the green one then should be 84. So I'm just tightening up because everything looks a little large on the image. So that was 84, so this should be 86, and this should be 88. So everything's a little tighter. So what I want to do now, on the lower edge of the gradient map is where the color gradient is added. On the top edge of the gradient map is where the opacity gradient falls. So they have the stock Russell's Rainbow has like a fade out from 100% to 80% as far as the opacity is concerned. So this is completely opaque, then it fades out, then it fades out more gradually. I'm going to just click on the 80%, the grey wedges, and I'm going to drag them off. And I'm going to, so we only have 4 opacity wedges, and I want, so we go from, what was it, 80. So I want the first black wedge to be at 80. And this was, the red wedge was 88, so I want this to be at 88. And then I want these to be at 4% either side of the black wedge. So this is at 80, I want this to be 76, which is about right. So now we have our gradient that blends out at the sides, it blends nicely in the middle. I think that's all I'm going to do. So what I'm going to do actually is rename this Adam's Rainbow, and I'm going to save that. So now we have the different rainbows. So I'm going to accept that. Our gradient fill, we're going to commit to that. Now obviously the rainbow, the phenomena never really touches the earth, it always fades out, obviously because the way that light is reacting with the moisture in the air. So we can replicate that by, this gradient fill is created by default. I'm going to hit the G key and make sure we have the black and white gradient, and I'm just going to start somewhere down here and sort of drag up to here so that we can start to see that wasn't quite there, so I'm going to maybe start a little further up and drag a little further up. That way it starts to fade out slowly. If I go back to the move tool, I can select this layer and try about 50%, and now it's looking more like a rainbow, and it's sitting nicely behind the foreground trees and overlapping the background. So I'm going to rename that Rainbow. So now let's do a little color correction. I'm going to add a curves layer at the top of the stack. I'm going to delete the layer mask just for some housekeeping. I'm going to just bump up the contrast a little bit and do a little S-curve. Just toggle that, see how it looks. It's affecting the rainbow too, which so I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to drag this behind the rainbow, so it's really just affecting the background. And the cool thing obviously with adjustment layers is that if that's a little strong, I can dial it back a little bit without having to worry about the curve. I'm going to dial that back just by hitting 8 to knock it back to 80%, maybe go back a bit more, 70%. So it just adds a little more contrast overall, and I'm going to do another curves on the top of the stack, delete the layer mask, and I'm just going to add a subtle bit of contrast, lower the gamma a little bit, just not quite as much, but so it doesn't interact with the rainbow too much, but kind of punches up the foreground a little bit. Also everything, I know it's the rainforest, but it's very green and very yellowy green. I want to just mess with the color a little bit, really just to sort of illustrate how to color correct with the curves. adjustment layer, but also maybe to add a bit of drama to the... So I'm going to warm it up with some red in the mid-tones. Let's take a look at the green. Let's bring the green down. And with the blue. So by lifting the blue up, you can see it's making the background, because I'm dealing with the midtones, it's making the background more blue. And as we've discussed in our color theory lesson, a blue background makes it appear further away. So we're really sort of adding some and give an overall blue cast to everything, just for some let's mess with the green a bit more. So overall, if we take a look at our color correction, it's gone from a very, very overall yellowy green to something with a bit more drama and maybe a bit more depth. The background trees are more blue and the foreground trees are a more richer green, and there's more contrast overall. So I like that. Maybe it's not completely realistic, but it's adding some drama, and we're telling the story with the color. Maybe we can argue for motivation for those color changes. So what I want to do with the rainbow now, let's, if I it's a little strong, so if I reduce it a bit more to 40%, it starts to lose a little bit. So what I want to do is Command J to duplicate that. I'm going to turn it off for now, and I'm going to select the lower rainbow and set it to screen. And we can take a look through by doing Shift, and we've got the plus and minus keys. We can sort of toggle through. We're going through the multiply, the darken modes, then we go through the lighten modes. Lighten actually doesn't look too bad, but it does get lost where it goes over this cloud mist here. Overlay, that's a bit strong. Soft light's not bad. So if I hold Option Shift S, I can toggle back to screen and just go back between Option Shift S and Option Shift N for normal. I can kind of see the difference that it's making. If I do Option Shift O for overlay, I can kind of see the difference. Sort of toggling back and forward, doing like an A/B comparison really. So Option Shift F for soft light and Option Shift S. So screen seems to be like the best, but we are losing, you know, some of the rainbow. Obviously if you're screening colors over white, nothing's going to happen. So if I put the main normal blending mode rainbow over the top and then just dial that back a little bit, we can start to see some you know, red and yellow back inside this cloud area. This is now at 30%. We toggle that, it adds a lot, so maybe we do 20%, to where we're just adding a little bit. Let's try 10%. 10%'s not bad. Maybe do 15. So if I hit 1.5 real quick. So if I hit 1, I'll get 10. If I hit 5, I'll get 50. But if I hit 1.5 in fairly quick succession, like half a second apart, then I can get an opacity of 15%, and that seems to be about right. That looks good. So that's looking, if we hold down Option, we've taken the image from that to that, that's got a lot of drama, and you could say you were in the rainforest and took this, you know, this magnificent rainbow appeared before your eyes, and well, maybe a scientist would say, well, those clouds wouldn't happen in the same conditions. I'm not sure if those conditions would exist in a rainbow situation. But for the exercise of using and modifying the stock rainbow gradient to make it more feathered, to make it tighter at the end of like at the end of an object, the idea that if we look at the rainbow gradient again, the idea that the gradient is all the way down this end means obviously you can create a circle and the arc goes around, and you could use that for racing stripes or any number of like graphic styles where you need a circle around the edge of a circle. That's a very sort of quick and efficient way of doing that. So quite cool. I hope you got something out of this. I think I want to leave that image as it is now. That's about as much as I want to do. I'm resisting the temptation to add a vignette. I'm not sure how the vignette would overlay with the rainbow, plus, you know, I use vignettes too much. So the gradient tool, super powerful, lots of options for creating, you know, effects and stylizations, and also some sort of semi-realistic or faux realism. So nice quick one for today. I know the last couple I've done have been rather less creative briefings. So this was brief. This was quick, easily digestible tip and trick for Photoshop. Hope you enjoyed that. Find me here to send your praise or hate, and do your social diligence by sharing, liking, subscribing, that sort of thing. And I will see you on the next creative briefing. Thanks for watching. Be creative.